I think we got through all the toolbar yesterday, actually. Um, so we can move on now to talking a little more about what some of these function menus up here do in a little more detail. We'll get a little more into actually manipulating some elements, um, doing some different kinds of fills and that sort of thing, and talking about layers especially. Okay. Another note, I guess I should just hurry up and say this before I get started, before I forget. Tomorrow, Ms. Dason's AP students are going to be basically spread out all over the place. This happens every year. They're trying to get their AP portfolios put together and submitted. So they need lots of room to sprawl out, and they will be in here all day. So tomorrow we are not going to be meeting in this room. We will be meeting in room 100, which is down in the English hallway. I needed a room that I could project from, so that's where they told me to go. So tomorrow, for 8th period, go to room 100. Write it down so you don't forget. I'll put a note on the door, but if you come all the way down here, then have to go all the way back, then you're going to have lots of late people. So let me double check, but yes, room 100 for period 8. Okay? So if you don't know where that is, you have today to figure it out. Okay. So moving on now. We are starting back up here. I think we can, you've got the gist of what the file menu does. So let's talk about edit for a minute, the edit menu. There's several things in here that you will use a lot of. Particularly when you get down here to paste and paste special and the transformations. Those are the main 3 that you will be using a lot in this assignment. Okay. The first one I'll talk about is paste and paste special. Okay. So I'm going to open one of my images. I'm going to open this one again. And I'm going to open this one. And again, by default, Photoshop's going to stick them up top here on the top row so that only one picture will be displayed at a time. And if I want to have floating windows, I can click on the title bar and just drag it down a little bit and separate it. Hopefully you guys remember that from past lessons. Okay. Now, when you're doing your box, it makes the most sense to work from background to foreground, okay? So meaning you want to fill the entire sides of each box with colors or images or gradients or something, and then you're gradually working towards the foreground. So you want to do all your filters and effects and colors first, and then you'll add your pictures and your text and all that on top. Because again, layers are it's like a stack of clear sheets of plastic. All right, so if you're looking at your box, what you're really looking at is a bunch of different layers stacked on top of each other, but they're transparent. You can see through them. So at a glance, it looks like everything is all on the same layer, but in reality, they're not, or at least they should not be. Okay, so there are 2 ways that you can fill something And you can just do a fill with a color, but you can also fill with an image, okay? So, okay. So let's say, for argument's sake, I have a really cool image here that I want to use on the entire side of my box. And I'm going to put more stuff on top of it. But let's say you have an image that's like, let's say you're doing like Finding Nemo or something, and you have a really cool underwater scene that you want to be as the background, okay? But you want it to take up the entire, like you want it to basically bleed off the edges of your box, okay? Now you could, in theory, do Control A to select, Control C to copy, go back here, then do Control V to paste. Okay. So now I have my little image here. And then you could scale this up. You could go Edit, Transform, Scale, hold down Shift. And then, you could try to blow it up big enough so that, it fits. But see, now it's going over the edge. And, you could try erasing the edges here. I could take the opacity of the layer down so that I could see through it. And I could take, my polygonal lasso and select that and then hit delete. I could do that. But the problem is, number one, it's kind of convoluted, but number two, this doesn't give me any kind of wiggle room. All right. Yes, in theory, technically that fits, but I can't move this around now. It's like basically stuck as that shape. Okay, so there's a better way to do it. And of course, this isn't the greatest image to be using for this, but it'll get the point across. All right, I'm just going to delete this layer and show you another trick called doing a paste into. Paste into basically uses what's called a layer mask. Just go ahead and drag this down to the trash. Get rid of it. And it works like this. Okay, the first thing you want to do, actually I've restarted, so I'm going to duplicate my layer, my background layer, so that I have it. I'm going to get my magic wand. I'm going to select, you want to select the area you're going to fill. So click on, I'm just going to click on this side of my box, okay, with the wand. Now I'm going to go to the image that I want to paste, which is this. Still have it selected, so I'm just going to hit Control C to copy. I'm going to go back to my template. Now, instead of doing a regular paste with Control V, I'm going to go down to where it says Paste Special. And it's giving me three options. I'm going to take the middle one, Paste Into. Okay. Now, at a glance, it looks like it just sort of did it like it did last time. However, if I get the Move tool and move it around, see what happens? A mask has been applied so that I can only see what I've pasted inside that selection I made. So now, when I go back to Edit, Transform, Scale, and I scale this up, it stays within the confines of my initial selection. Hit Enter. Now, the benefit of this is that number one, it's less steps, it's less work, so it's more efficient. But also, see, look, now I can move this around inside the window and I can kind of, again, this isn't the greatest way to do this. I mean, in terms of like the image I used, because it's getting cropped off no matter what I do. I suppose if I really wanted to use this image, I could scale it down a little bit. So that you can see it. And then sample this yellow with my eyedropper tool. Get my magic wand and try to fill in, that part of it. I mean, I guess I could even use my paintbrush. Whoops, I still got Batman head from yesterday. See that? And I can just paint that flat color on the edges and fill it in. Paint bucket or edit fill would have been a little quicker, but you get the idea. Okay? It's a little quick and dirty, but there you go. Okay. Then once I have that done, it's a little busy. What I could do is I could take the opacity of the layer, push it back a little bit, and then I could put text or other elements on top of this. I could put activities, a maze, a word find, or something. Okay? So you can do that with any image. Okay, so it's edit, paste special, paste into. Now, everything else in the edit menu, we've gone over the undos and, hotkeys for that. Control Z for one undo or Alt Control Z for multiple. If you want to redo, it's Shift Control Z instead of Alt Control Z. You can also fade the effects of a past action by going to fade. Okay, copy, paste, those are hotkeys, paste special. Fills and strokes. I went over that briefly, but I'll do it again really quick here. Let me create a new layer, as you should always do. The button is right here. Click on that, new layer made. By the way, you should always name your layers. Double click on the little button there and then name it whatever you want. Okay, so a fill, again, is basically, filling with a color. So let me go to my background layer, select a side, go back up here, choose a color, I'll do blue, edit, fill. Foreground color, that's all good, okay. Okay, so that's just a plain fill. We didn't do stroke yet. Stroke is an outline. So again, I go to edit stroke. First, I'm going to create a new layer. Again, I'm going to change the color of my stroke to like yellow, let's say. Hit OK. It's going to ask me how many pixels wide I want my outline to be. And if I want it on the inside of the selection, in the center, or on the outside, I'm going to choose inside, because if I do it outside, you won't be able to see it. Everything else looks good. Blending should be normal. Hit OK. Now, do you see, Control H to hide, it added that little outline to the inside of my selection. If I had done a brighter color, let's do it again with a brighter color. So there we go. Okay. So you can add accents of outlines and color. Now, I did this on a separate layer so that if I decide I want to change it, all I have to do is turn it off or delete it, and I can change the color. So you can do things like draw shapes with selections. All right, I can go back now and get my marquee tool and draw a box, and then put a stroke. Let's do it on the outside this time. Hit OK. Right? And then I can put text inside there or something. So you can use a combination of selection tools and stroke to outline shapes or fill shapes. Okay? And then put text or whatever inside them. All right, so that's basically the edit menu in a nutshell. There's a lot more here, but I mean, you know, the warping and stuff you don't need to worry about. I can show you real quick what the other transforms do. Let's get our other image that I had here. By the way, and this is helpful, if you know you have a file open somewhere in Photoshop but you can't find it, go to the window menu and scroll all the way down to the bottom, and there's a listing right here of every image I have open right now. So even though I can't see it, there he is right there, my red tornado guy. Okay. So I'm going to bring him over to my box. Remember, I've got a nice solid color background, so I can just select the white space, hold down Shift, select all the white, then go to select inverse. So now only he is selected. I can drag him right over. Ba-boom. Okay. So let's look at the other transformations real quick. In addition to scaling, which we've been over, you can rotate anything you want. You can skew, you know, make something look like it's in perspective, or, you know, really the uses of that are maybe a little bit limited, but it's there. You can do distort, which gives you, it's sort of like skew, but it gives you a little more options. Perspective, which, you know, again, if you have, this is a neat tool because you can actually just draw something normal and then like a straight on view of something, and then just use the perspective tool, and it kind of does all the work for you as far as making it look like it's receding to a vanishing point. And then warp. This is the one where you can really get in there and make it look like it's melting, or, you know, you can get some crazy kind of effects. But obviously you can see by what I'm doing here that you could really get carried away and quickly overdo it. So, and if you don't like it, hit enter. Okay, just hit OK, cancel out of it. All right, so you can take individual elements and manipulate them with edit transform. Okay. I mean, there's a few other things in here I could show you. We did the define brush preset where I showed you how to make your own brush. We don't need to worry about the rest of this. I mean, I could go into it, but we don't have the time, so we'll move on. Now to image. Okay, there's a few things in here that are important. Mode basically just tells you what type of file you're dealing with, all right? You want to be working with RGB color. Now, sometimes when you grab an image from the internet and open it up in Photoshop, it might be another format. It might be grayscale, or if it's like a GIF, it might be like index color. So if you're having any funkiness with your image, try to remember to go to image mode and make sure it's RGB color. And if it's not, you can convert it to that. That's what you want it to be. If it's grayscale, you won't have any color displayed at all. CMYK is for print. We're fine with what we're doing now with RGB. All right. Adjustments. This is a robust one, okay? So under adjustments, you've got several things here: brightness, contrast, levels, curves, and exposure. All four of these basically do the same thing. They just do it in different ways, just like the selection tools. All right. Basically, they all play with the amount of light and dark pixels in your image, especially if you have a black and white image or a really dark image. Let's open up the Robin image. This one. This is a good one to test on. Okay. Okay. Now, this image is kind of dark. So if I want to lighten it, I go to Image Adjustments and I go to Levels. You'll see a little graph here displayed. All right, this is called a histogram. This just shows you in a visual way, like the kind of measurement of light pixels versus dark pixels. You've got three triangles here: a white one, a gray one, and a black one. The white controls the white balance. So if I click on the white and drag it over this way, see how my image is getting brighter and brighter? Okay. Generally speaking, you don't want to make it too bright. So you just want to drag it up to the point where the histogram starts to just rise a little bit. And that's probably, you don't want to take it any further than that, otherwise it'll be too bright. And the light parts of the image will like be overexposed. The black you can take and drag the other way, and you see how that darkens things. Okay. And then the gray does your midtones, right? So see, just by sliding those three triangles, I have gone from that to that. So it looks a lot better. So, I mean, you can actually tell what's going on in the background now. So that is levels. Now, brightness contrast is the same thing, basically, right? But I like levels better because it gives me a little more control. So, but either one, I guess, is fine. Okay, curves and exposure, don't worry about those. Hue saturation is the next one. That basically controls the color and the amount of vibrancy of that color. All right, so if I slide the hue thing, watch what happens to the image. You see how it just kind of starts changing colors? Kind of trippy. By the way, when you do this, you can really tell what poor quality this image is because you can see all those little artifacts in his cape and stuff from the JPEG compression. It's really kind of bad, but you know, we'll work with it. Okay, so hue just basically changes the colors. Saturation changes the vibrancy of those colors. You see how much brighter, not brighter in terms of value, but brighter in terms of intensity that those colors are. Now, you know, once I drag that forward, okay, this is the way it was. This is me when I'm increasing the saturation. This is when I take it all the way down. You see now it becomes black and white. It's totally desaturated. Desaturated means all the color has been sucked out of it. Okay? And then lightness and darkness pretty much does what you would think it would do. It changes the overall brightness and darkness of the entire image, which you don't really need to mess with. Okay, so that's hue and saturation. Color balance. If you have an image that maybe has a slight yellowish tint to it, or a bluish tint, or something was up with the camera when you took the picture, you can use these sliders here under color balance to either take that out or compensate for it. See, if I slide the cyan and red, if I slide it towards the red, then the overall picture becomes warmer, right? All those values in the background, those earth tones are warmed up. Everything kind of has a reddish tint to it. If I go the other way, now it's got more of a cool kind of aspect to the colors. All right, so each of those kind of does their own thing, and you can do that for shadows, midtones, or highlights. Okay. I don't think you really need to worry about any of these other ones. Just hue, saturation, color balance, and levels. And of course, desaturate just takes all the color out. But that's it for that one. Okay. Now, if you go back to image and continue going down, remember you've got image size. I did that the other day, or you can determine the dimensions and the resolution of your image. That's important. Remember, ideally, you want 300 DPI, or at least more than 72 when you're using images. Image rotation basically just flips the whole image and rotates it. Like if I do 180, now it's upside down, right? Undo that. Duplicate just makes a copy of the image that the file that you're working on. So image duplicate, if you need a copy for some reason, that's what you do. And that's it for image. Now layer. This is the biggie, okay? Layer. You got to understand the concept of layers, and you have to. It just takes. It's a little bit of a learning curve, but this menu here you're going to be using fairly extensively with this assignment. Okay. So I have briefly touched on layers, but I'm going to go back into more depth now. Okay. So let's go back to our template. All right, as you know, our layers are displayed down here in this window on the lower right-hand corner of the screen. Okay, each layer is listed in order, again, like a stack of papers. Okay, and the visibility of those layers is dependent on their order in this list, in the stack. Okay, so for example, I'm going to take Red Tornado here, who is currently on layer 3. And I'm going to take this layer, I'm going to left click on it, and notice the little hand changes from a pointer to a grabby hand. And then you're going to drag it down. I'm going to drag it down to here. Now, at a glance, it doesn't look like the image has changed at all. But watch what happens when I drag this over here. Uh-oh. Where did he go? It's still in the image, but now it's behind this fill because I dragged the layer that he's on down underneath the layer that contains the fill. So see, he's still there. So sometimes you will lose or seemingly lose an element in your file. It becomes invisible. And the reason why is just because there's other layers on top of it and it's covering it. So if you want to bring him forward again, I see you, right? If you want to bring him forward again, you simply grab that layer and drag it back up to the top of the stack, and there he is. Okay. This seems really obvious and it is, but this is something a lot of beginners struggle with. All right. They get flustered because they can't find things and they don't understand it's just because a layer got moved or something happened like that. All right. But again, this is also the benefit of layers. It's a good thing to have all of these things separate and editable. Okay. It gives you more flexibility and it makes it easier to make corrections. Okay. So even though it seems more confusing and it seems harder at first, it really is a good thing. Okay. Now, you can delete layers really easily. If you have a layer you no longer want, all you got to do is grab it and drag it at the very bottom right-hand corner of my screen right here. It's a little trash can icon. You drag a layer down there to throw it away. Or you can right-click on it and go to delete layer right here. Again, all of these options that you can find up here on the layer menu are also found here on the layer window. You click this little button here with 3 lines and you get all those same options. Okay. The other thing you can do with a layer is duplicate it. So let's say I want more than one red tornado. I could copy and paste him multiple times, or I could just duplicate the layer. I click this, I go duplicate layer, hit OK. Now I've got 2 of them. All right, so I could have a whole army of them if I wanted to, or I could do it with other characters. Okay, so you can delete layers, you can move layers around in the stack, you can duplicate them, delete them, anything. You can also merge them together. If you click on, again, on this little button over here in the corner, there's a button called Merge Down. What Merge Down does, it takes the layer you have selected and merges it with the layer that is directly below it. All right, so right now, my 2 guys here are on separate layers, so I can move them independently. All right, I'm moving this guy now. If I want to move this other guy, I select this one. Now I'm moving him. But if I go to, let me go back up here. If I go to merge down, now they're on the same layer and they're moving together because they're both on one layer. Okay. So later on, let's say you have 10 elements, separate elements, and you just have too many layers to keep up with, and your list is a mile long, and you want to start consolidating, you can say, okay, I think these things can be on the same layer. So then you just merge those down and get them all together. And it just sort of helps organize your file a little bit. All right, does it make sense? And again, you can do things with layer opacity. And you can change the blending options, all right? You see these things here, multiply, color burn, whatever. All right, you can switch these up and get different effects. All right, do you see what happened when I hit multiply? Let me zoom in a little bit here. Hitting multiply kind of makes the layer transparent and kind of dark, right? Overlay. Right, so that's kind of a cool effect. Some of these you don't really know what they're going to do until you try them. Soft light, hard light. So, just know that on any given layer, you can go in and change some of these blending options and get different effects, which you may like, you may not like. If you experiment and you decide you don't like any of them, simply change it back to normal again, and it'll go back to the way it was. All right, finally, I want to talk to you about layer style. This is a cool one. You're going to use this a lot. Okay, it's hidden, but if you double click on any layer, and not just on the name part, the name part is just there to name it whatever you want to name it. And I'm being bad about naming my layers, and I'm being a bad example. You should always name all your layers. When you only have a few, it's not a big deal, but when you have like 50 layers in an image, and you're getting to like layer 96, copy, copy number 3, then it really starts to get confusing. So naming your layers is a good thing. But if you double click like a little past where the name of the layer is right in here, you'll get a window pop up called layer style. And on this layer, on this window, you've got bevel and emboss. You can add all these cool special effects to a layer. So for example, on my red tornado, I'll scooch this over so you can see it. I'm going to check stroke. See what that did? It adds an outline around all of the elements on that layer. If I double click on the stroke bar, I get a parameters window where I can change the color, I can change the thickness of the outline. So if you have something on your layer and you want to make it stand out, use layer style. All right, you can do a stroke, you can do a glow. Let's do outer glow. I think that's kind of cool. Check that out. Fancy, right? It's like a glow, but it's softer. You could change the spread of it, the size, the color. If you want it to be a different color, like red, now he's got a red glow. All right, see, that's kind of cool, all right? And you can really make your box look professional by using some of these. Bevel and emboss, let's uncheck this one and try bevel emboss. Change the depth of it, size. You can change the angle of the light source. Change it from an inner bevel to an outer bevel. That looks cooler. Somewhere there should be like an opacity or something. There it is, opacity. See how now he looks like he's kind of popping out of the box? And I can change the angle of the light. See, that's pretty cool. All right, so I could play with these all day, but layer style, and you can add this to text too. So you can make your text look like it's popping out, or put outlines around your text or any of that stuff. All right, so layer style, definitely something you're going to be using a lot of. All right. That more or less does it for the layers. I'm not going to really get into, layer masks and vector masks. I think that's a little too confusing. Sometimes, though, you will accidentally put yourself into layer mask mode or quick mask mode, and nothing will work. And the way to fix that is down here on the toolbar. There's a little button here with two little, it's right next to the color switch button. That kind of changes your it switches you in and out of layer mask mode. That's this one right here at the very bottom. So sometimes you click that accidentally without realizing it, and things go haywire, and people are like, I can't do anything now. So if that happens, try that button first. Okay, so type now. Type, we went over a little bit yesterday when I showed you paths. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that unless you have any questions. I'll do a quick review of it. Again, in order to access the type tools, you just click on the button, the little T button there. And remember, there's two ways you can enter type. You can either just click on the box and start typing, but what I think is a better idea is for you to click and drag to create a text field, and then your text stays like that. And then you can adjust the size of the text box like that. I think that's easier. So always create a text field before you type. And, you know, one other thing I'll say about type is that typography is such an integral part of graphic design, and the understanding of type and how to use type in an effective way, like font styles. And it's something that is so important, and not a lot of people really understand typography as an art form. So many people don't put enough thought into the types of fonts they use about whether or not it really goes with your design. And I could honestly teach a whole year on just typography. So all I can say is try to do the best you can as far as making sure your text matches with the theme that you're using. Okay. So for example, right now I have got this Batman visual theme going on. It's very comic booky, very bold, stark flat color, thick outlines. So this font that I'm using is very much like a dialogue font that you would use in a comic book. So it goes together really well, I think, with that visual stuff. But let's say I change the style to this. Now, at a glance, you might think, hey, what's wrong with that, Mr. Kemple? That looks fine, all right? I think that what I had works a lot better with my style than this. All right, I think a sans serif kind of font works better. Or what if I change it to something really classic, like Garamond or Helvetica or something, right? I mean, yeah, let's do Garamond. All right, there's nothing wrong with that, but you know, I think that there are better choices, okay? I mean, if this was a magazine article or if this was like a term paper, then yeah, that works fine. But it's not really eye-catching. It's not really bold. I think that what I had before goes better with my art style. So all I'm saying is think a little bit about what your theme is and what you're doing with it. And don't just put any old font up there like because you think it looks good, like, you know, Comic Sans or some really ugly thing like I don't even know why it exists. Okay? Cuz Photoshop gives you a lot of options, but that doesn't mean they're all good options, right? And that goes for if you download a font on the internet. Think about what you're doing. And if you can find a font that goes along with what you're doing, then that's awesome. Think about the kinds of fonts that are used. Like, I don't know, I'm thinking obscure terms. Like, you guys have hopefully have all seen Star Wars, right? You remember the text crawl in Star Wars that starts each movie. Now, if that text crawl was done in Garamond, number one, it probably wouldn't even be as readable. But would it have had the same impact? Probably not. You know, the font that they use for Star Wars has a very specific kind of effect to it, a specific purpose. It's very bold, very eye-catching, and when you saw it on a big screen, it really stood out. All right, so text, not only the placement of the text, but the style of the text really impacts the overall effect of your design. And I don't think enough people really take that into account. So think about typography in that sense. I mean, that's not doing it justice. Again, I could spend days and days and days on typography, but we don't have the time, and you would probably kill me, so I won't do that. All right. The only thing other thing I'll say about type is that when you are modifying your type, you can always click back, have the layer selected, click back on the text with your text tool and reactivate it. But the text is never really a permanent part of your image until you rasterize it. All right. And you will see this term. Okay. So let me click off of this. Now, if I right click on my text layer, you'll see something down here saying rasterize type. What that means is it's saying, do you want Photoshop to convert this text into pixels and make it permanent? Okay. So if you are completely done with the text and you know you don't need to change or do anything else to it, you can always rasterize it and be good. And at that point, if you want to go back and adjust it, you probably need to just redo it. Delete the layer, okay? So that's that. A lot of your options will disappear once. And again, let's do the blending options thing. Let's layer style, I mean. Now I can go back and add a stroke to these letters if I want to. Let's change that to red. Okay. Change the size. See that? So now you can do layer style and text at the same time. Okay. All right, bell's going to ring, so I'm going to stop it here today. Tomorrow, we will talk about filters and a few other things, and then that should be it. All right, so we will be finished with our preliminary little crash course here in Photoshop, and you guys can really start making your boxes. So your homework, again, is to continue thinking about your theme, about your design. Maybe, hopefully, you are sketching on paper, some thumbnail, and you're thinking about what kind of activities you're going to have on all four sides of your box. I'll have more on that for you tomorrow as well. Don't forget, Honor Sketch is due tomorrow, and we are in room 100 tomorrow. All right? Don't forget. Come down here, 8th period. You're going to come down to an empty room or a room with a bunch of seniors in it, or juniors doing AP stuff.